There were 6 secret leftover characters from the digital circus, but it turns out one of them changes everything you thought you knew about the show, which started with this first abstracted one whose door was shown in the pilot episode. But who even is this strange looking creature and why were they important? Well, behind the scenes, Glitch ended up revealing an entire lore page about them that many people missed. On top of this page telling us how the character was officially named Grinchilda, it also revealed how there was actually more to Grinchilda than we originally thought. You see, Grinchilda's original designer started off by sharing how Grinchilda was essentially more important than a lot of the other abstracted characters, as they gave us bonus details about her in particular, including how when the character was first created, she was designed in a similar way to the baby Grinch, so her name was essentially just a mash of the words Grinch and child with an A thrown in at the end. The designer continues on saying how she was definitely one of their favorites from the abstracted characters they drew for the hallway scene in the pilot. Only our next character was even more important. While Spike was already given their own dedicated scene in episode 8, we know that there was actually more to them than we originally thought. What if I told you we actually knew how they abstracted in the circus in the first place? You see, it turns out the tragic fate of one of the digital circus's more important original members, one who would perfectly match up with what we were told about Spike, for reasons we'll get into later on, was directly hinted at during a specific cliffhanger all the way back in episode 2. Let's take a look at this scene, where shortly after deleting Gummy Goo, Caine specifically mentions how if he ever loses track over who's a human and who's an NPC, who knows what could happen, with a dark implication being shown before Caine randomly gets lost in thought. This was clearly meant to reference a tragic mix-up situation that happened earlier on in the digital circus between Caine and a specific circus member he never ends up mentioning. But how exactly does Spike fit into this mix-up, and how could we be sure that this dark cliffhanger scene was potentially referencing his fate for real? Well, before getting to that, we first have to cover our next abstracted characters. As it turns out, employees over at Glitch recently revealed new details about a whole group of them. You see, Ribbit's voice actor ended up essentially asking what fans of the show really wanted to know, to which one fan responded by asking for the names of 3 of them. Only these 3 specific characters were some of the only ones that were never addressed throughout any point in the show whatsoever. While most of the other abstracted characters were given a circus introduction scene at the beginning of episode 8, as well as additional lore from the character's designer, these 3 were strangely excluded. Only Ribbit's voice actor ended up finally giving us additional details about them, which started with this pink Cyclops looking character, who we're told was actually named Glorp. Next, we're told how this clown character, who had a similar look to Kaufmo, was named Sad Guy. And finally, we're told how this clam-looking character was named Shrooms. But going back to what we're told about Spike, it turns out there was more to the dark cliffhanger scene that was potentially referencing his fate in the circus. You see, this isn't the first time a seemingly identical dark cliffhanger scene in the show ended up pointing directly to the actual fate of a circus member in the same exact way. It turns out in episode 7, we saw a second dark cliffhanger moment between Caine and the circus members, where they discover that he's been controlling their minds the entire time. Only after this discovery, Caine reveals in a strange way how it wouldn't end well if he ever took this mind control too far. Something that had the same exact sort of dark implication as our previously mentioned episode 2 scene. The 2 scenes were clearly meant to be connected somehow, but in this other case, Kinger ends up responding to Caine's implication by directly mentioning Scratch, the first abstraction. This abstracted character was who Caine was specifically referring to here with his dark implication. He was talking about Scratch, meaning it'd make perfect sense to assume something similar was going on with his second dark implication. As we know how Caine has made multiple mistakes in the past, not just one. Our episode 2 scene was meant to be another direct reference to an abstracted character and how they ended up leaving the circus for good, just like how Scratch did. But in that case, how do we know for sure that this specific character Caine references here was Spike? Well, we know this reference involved Caine mixing up a human and an NPC and inflicting harm on them, meaning the human character he caused harm to had to be someone who resembled one of the NPCs. It had to be someone he could have realistically mixed up, which is where Spike finally comes into play here. On top of Spike sticking out from the other abstracted characters, as he was the final character design released behind the scenes, he was also the only character that slightly resembled any of the NPCs throughout the adventures we've seen. He slightly resembled Gummy Goo. While Spike and Gummy Goo clearly weren't designed to be the same exact species or anything, we know that they were the only two reptilian-looking characters from the entire show. They both had a lighter stomach area compared to the rest of their body, as well as having a more jaggedy-looking mouth. And despite Spike obviously being from an earlier timeline in the show than when we first see Gummy Goo in episode 2, we know Caine has revealed his tendency to reuse NPCs, something that Ragatha also confirms in episode 4 after saying she recognizes Orbsman from a past adventure. It wouldn't be far-fetched to assume Gummy Goo was first introduced in the Circus Adventures while Spike was still around, and simply ended up getting reused after that. Meaning, because of the similarities between the two, it makes sense that Caine had the potential to mix them up and accidentally cause Spike to abstract. And while this never gets confirmed in the show, we directly saw in episode 2 how Gummy Goo specifically was the one Caine ended up deleting after he entered the circus. The very same character who also just so happens to resemble one of the previously abstracted ones that also triggers Caine into referencing his big mix-up between a human and NPC in the first place. Spike being the human Caine references here is the only logical conclusion. Only there was one more character many people missed that was specifically left over from episode 9. In this episode, we're introduced to multiple different versions of Jax during the scene where Pomni enters his mind. Only there was one version of him we aren't able to see. You see, during Pomni's conversation with the different Jaxes, everyone gets interrupted by a loud banging sound coming from one of the locked doors. Clearly there was meant to be another character on the other side of this door, only we're never shown the truth throughout the entire episode. So what's going on here? Well, we saw how all of the other Jax versions had a very negative reaction to the one banging on this locked door in the first place. Clearly this was a repressed character for whatever reason, and I'm able to fully reveal the truth about their identity in this video right here. So for what we know towards the Digital Circus's final episode, make sure to check it out.